Can we keep China from deciding, hey, let's make a move quick and annex it, right? So that's the deterrence option. Whatever we do makes them decide we're not going to make a move. Are we sufficiently deterring? And do top military officials think we're not doing enough to send that message to China, like, don't even try?
Well, what's interesting is a Navy official once said when it comes to nuclear-armed submarines, it's to send a message, don't even think about it, to a potential nuclear attack, which is there is this counter-attack, this catastrophic response possibility. But to answer your question, yeah, I think the idea is it has to be deterrence in part because of this fait accompli prospect, the cost and the effort required to actually extract an embedded Chinese from the island of Taiwan would be very, very high. It doesn't mean it wouldn't be taken on. So I think the hope would be that the deterrence would be sufficient enough, and there are several key ways that this happens. One is a massive naval presence. You have a huge portion of the U.S. Navy based within what they call the Pacific Fleet. Years ago, the Pentagon began to migrate what they call the Pacific Pivot to recognize the dawn or the advent or the continuation, rather, of the great power era and be in position to respond. So you heard the Navy Secretary, the four P's: people, perseverance, presence. That's one of the key things, is to be there, which is why in recent months the U.S. Navy has conducted dual carrier drills. They have carrier strike groups, what they call Fleet, which is the Pacific Theater. They also run destroyers through FONOPs, or Freedom of Navigation operations, through the South China Sea to essentially make the point your territorial claims and your phony island building is essentially not legitimate under international convention, so we are going to demonstrate that the U.S. will fly, sail, and operate wherever international law permits.
So are we, though? I guess, you know, I keep pushing I know you don't have a crystal ball, but, you know, you wrote that you know, everyone from Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin to the Army Chief of Staff, the Air Force Chief of Staff, Charles Brown, and others talked about China's a seriously and quote pacing threat. What does that mean, a pacing threat? Meaning they're speeding up and we're not keeping pace, or we are keeping pace?
Well, I think the recognition is the pace of military modernization and the sheer mass and the speed at which they are expanding is of great concern to the Pentagon. And that's why I don't think it's an accident you hear all of these senior leaders using that terminology, pacing threat. Just today, there was a fascinating think tank event, and Dr. Griffin, the former Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, spoke specifically about hypersonics. There is widespread recognition that China is ahead of the U.S. in terms of deployable hypersonic weapons right now. So the question Dr. Griffin raised was, what if China, through conventional hypersonic weapon superiority, had the ability to essentially hold at bay any Western force from coming close enough for fear of being eliminated by a salvo of high-speed hypersonic weapons? And so that could present a tactical and strategic dynamic for the West to consider should they want to confront China. Should there be this imbalance when it comes to hypersonic capability, which is why the U.S. is closing the gap quickly.